We are going to be going through something really exciting today. So today is the first of our 3 summits that we're running over the next 6 weeks. And I want to just kind of give you a preface as to where this has come from, why we're doing what we're doing at Flume. Over the past 10 weeks, we all know things have changed quite dramatically. Things have changed in terms of audience behavior. Things have changed in terms of clients and how they're buying and how they're making decisions. And we've done a lot of webinars where we're trying to help you guys navigate these times. But ultimately, I've been there telling you, in most cases, what I think you should do. And ultimately, it's always pivoted around one thing, which is we need to look at everything from the client's perspective and make it easy for them to say yes, because it's really tough for them right now. But what we've never done is actually proven that by getting a real one in. And today we are going to be doing that. Today we're going to be actually speaking to and listening to and hearing from real clients about the changes they're going through and what they need and don't need from the sales experience. Now, we're looking to work with you guys over the next 6 weeks and your colleagues and peers to help to redefine sales excellence, because fundamentally, what's happening with these changes in audience and buying behavior is it's redefining what good is going to look like in sales coming out of this outbreak. Post-outbreak, sales needs to be redefined. So that's what we're trying to do with you guys, is create 3 summits. Today is from the audience perspective. Second one in 2 weeks' time, which we'll put a link to on the right, from the audience perspective. And that's about how to drive ROI for your clients, which is going to be pivotal to anything you do as a sales team. And the third one is going to be with sales leaders to talk about what that means from the salesperson's perspective. So there's 3 that we're going to be going along on this journey. So please join us for all of them. Today, we're going to be in Summit 1 listening from arguably the most important people, which is your clients. And we have 3 clients or 3 people we're going to be hearing from in particular today. I'm not going to even chance bringing up my slides because that's just going to slow things down. So the people we've got are Sophie Holt from Explory, who is going to be talking to us around some of the insights that are out there in the industry right now from buyers and what they think to the sales experience, what they're saying in terms of how happy they are with it, what they like, what they don't like. And some of it's quite hard hitting that Sophie's going to share. But what's interesting is there is a route through that she will talk to you about as to actually how to help to grow your revenues, but also grow other parts of your marketing solutions as well positively by working with your client in the right way. We're then going to be hearing from 2 buyers, which is Paul Kontonis from CBS Viacom and also David Buttle from the FT, and they can introduce themselves more a little bit later. But the point there is I'm going to be asking them questions around decision making, questions around the sales experience, what works, what doesn't work. And for you guys, what we want to do is give you a way to kind of shape your sales process out of what they say. So we'll be trying to go quite explicitly into what does and doesn't work at different stages of the process with a view that you guys can action this straight after. That's what I want from this. So you're then going to have the opportunity to make sure you can action stuff, to ask questions to them at the very end. So 3 parts. Number 1, we're going to be getting the latest research and insights. Number 2, we're going to be looking at a panel and asking the buyers what's happening in their world and what they need and don't need from salespeople. Number 3, we're going to give you guys the opportunity to ask those questions. We have put aside an hour and a half for today. It might not take that long. It might do, but we'll go for as long as we need to make sure we've answered all your questions. So I think that's the majority of it. Just a couple of shout outs. So we've been backed with all of this stuff that we're doing by MASH Media, AEO, PPA, and thank you for your ongoing support there. And for you guys, the way I'd recommend watching this and interacting is, number 1, in the questions bit down below, not on the right in the chat, in the questions bit, think of any questions you want answered by these guys and girls at the end, and we will feed them in. So get working on that. The polls bit, use that as well so we know where you are against other people. And just think, what can you do with this? This is a mega important and urgent webinar / summit that we're running now. So take advantage of it and make sure you ask the questions you need answered. So without further ado, I'm going to try and bring in, I hope, Sophie in a second, who's going to take you through some insights from 2019 and 2020. And what you'll see is a lot of this is around the trade show exhibitor side of things. But for those of you who aren't thinking, well, I'm not trade show or exhibitor, I'm media, what's interesting over the past 10 weeks, and you've all seen it, is that because of the changes in audience behavior and client behavior, whether you're used to working in events, actually we're moving more media now because that's what's available in terms of virtual events, etc. Or if you're working in media, so many of you are starting to build these kind of interactive sessions for your audience as well, that actually the definition of the industry is slightly changing. So for all of you watching this, will give you a real insight into what clients do and don't need and want in terms of the sales experience, and what makes clients come back to you and what makes them get the most from events that you guys offer. So have a watch of this. We'll have a quick question time after where I'll fire some questions at Sophie. I've been banging on for a while. I did promise I wouldn't, so I'm going to hand over right now and see, fingers crossed, if we can get this working. Sophie.
Hi, everyone.
Wow, we're here. So, Sophie, do you want to just a really brief intro who you are, and then I will get your slides up on the screen.
Yeah, I'm Sophie. I'm the strategy director at a company called Explory. We specialise in understanding customer experience around live events. So we work with corporates, trade show organisers, venues all around the world. So when Raoul said, do we have the voice of the customer? I'm like, yes, got the voice of about 3 million customers if you're interested. So I'm going to take you through some of the things we know about our audience in general.
Fab. Okay. Do you want to try a bit of screen sharing here?
Let's go for it. What else can I make?
Give it a go. Nothing else can go wrong, right? And I'm going to minimize me, if we can get it to work. Here we go. So Sophie, over to you, and I'll come back in when you get to the end of this. Ladies and gents, have a think about this when you're listening to it and think, are there any questions you want to ask? And you can feed it into the questions at the bottom, and I'll ask Sophie at the end. Sophie, over to you. I'll see you in 10 or so minutes.
Thanks, Raoul. And I guess thanks for demonstrating that virtual events can be every bit as stressful as live events in the right circumstances. I'm going to take you through some of the data that Explory hold that comes from the post-event research, post-event surveys that we do with over 3,000 trade shows around the world. This is just based on trade show data, so I know some of you in the audience work in a much wider media setting, and I'm sure you're not about to use any of this against us when you're selling against trade shows in the future. It's all top secret, right? So some of the data comes from the benchmarks that Explory hold, but also we conducted a really large scale study at the back end of last year where we spoke to thousands of trade show exhibitors around the world. And this is the biggest survey ever undertaken about the experiences of exhibitors at trade shows. Now, I'd like to say it was lots of good news, but sadly it doesn't make for the most comfortable reading. Whilst we wouldn't say trade shows were a burning platform before this crisis, you probably could smell some smoke. But what really comes through clearly is there's a strong commercial advantage. And it's been really important for people who are in commercial teams to understand the exhibitor relationship, because you're very much the starting point of that relationship. It's the conversations exhibitors are having with you that are setting their expectations and setting the tone for the rest of the journey. So let's dive on in. This is the section I euphemistically call highlights. So the picture overall in terms of exhibitor experience is stable, but it's fair to say there's room for improvement in the sales process. And that trust is a really big part of that, and we will need to change to build trust. And finally, we can prove through data, which is everyone's favourite way of doing it, I know, that there really is a commercial advantage there. Now, what you're seeing here is just a quick guide to a question called Net Promoter Score. I'm sure many of you use Net Promoter Score on your own shows, or you might use it if you sell other products as well. It's a really universally used tool to understand customer experience, whether that's of a restaurant, a new car you bought, or attending a trade show. It asks the question, how likely are you to recommend the thing that you've just experienced? And people go from 0, I'm not at all likely, to 10, I'm extremely likely. And we can transform that into what we call a Net Promoter Score. And this means we can compare our industry with other industries, and we can track progress over time. So what we need to understand about this is if we're seeing a negative net promoter score, so anything less than 0, we've got more people who wouldn't recommend us than would recommend us. And then the opposite is true. If you've got a positive net promoter score, you've got more people who would recommend your products and services. So it's a really quick way of taking a temperature check of customer experience. Now this comes from Exploratory dataset. We ask the same question in client surveys all around the world, and it means we can track over time. So you can see that these scores move a little bit, but not very much. But the main thing that really stands out, they're well into the minuses. Our exhibitors are not likely to recommend exhibiting at the trade shows they've just exhibited at. Now, of course, that's not universally true. There are some trade shows in every sector, in every part of the world, who deliver fantastic net promoter scores in the 80s and 90s. It absolutely can be done, but it's not being done with great frequency. And I just want to draw on the analogy of home ownership, a distant dream potentially at the end of this recession. So if you are a homeowner, you will probably be doing things to make your house as nice as possible. You might be decorating it, you might make sure your garden's nice. And one of the reasons you might do that is it builds value into your house. But if you're in a bad neighborhood, if your neighbors' houses are very run down, maybe there's high crime in the area, no matter what you do to your own house, the value of your house is always going to be impacted by the houses around you. And I'd suggest what we're seeing at the moment in terms of our exhibitors' experience is we're actually in a bad neighborhood. Because when we asked that question on a really large survey to thousands of exhibitors worldwide, we actually got a lower net promoter score. So this time we're talking not about the show that exhibitor has just previously exhibited at. We said, how likely are you to recommend trade shows as a channel? And that net promoter score drops. And what's happening here is these exhibitors are exhibiting at several trade shows every year. The average was 10 for this study. So even if you are part of a team on a trade show that you know has a really strong exhibitor experience, you're actually always slightly fighting against the poor experience that your clients might have elsewhere. So from that first experience, you've actually got a little bit of an uphill challenge with most exhibitors. And luckily from this really big study, we could find lots of indications as to why that net promoter score might be quite low. And I know I'm joining the Flume team over the next couple of weeks to share some more details from this study. So let's just dip in today to the sales and planning process. Now, 90% of exhibitors who responded to this survey said that they had some kind of frustration during the sales and planning process. And that came from cost, hidden costs, the overall cost of the booth, but it also came from service levels. So service from the organisers and service from contractors was also really starting to grate with our exhibitors. And it's important to recognise even our exhibitors generally don't differentiate between what services are provided by the organisers, by contractors or by the venue. They see it all as being your fault. And potentially if it goes well, you get all the credit as well. But it's no use trying to pass blame for this because in the exhibitor's eyes, it rests with the organiser. But what's particularly challenging is when we look at these areas of frustration that our exhibitors were telling us about and map them back to net promoter scores, we can start to see what are the things that are causing the really low scores. And here we've got the cost elements. They're causing net promoter scores to dip down to -29, -31, and the service levels even lower. So where our exhibitors are feeling they're getting poor service during the sales process, it's already driving really, really low net promoter scores. So actually their experience at the event itself has to do a huge amount to build back from there. And spoiler alert for next week, it sometimes falls short from doing that. So I mentioned trust, and I know if you've been to one of Flume's webinars before, trust is a really big thing, an authentic relationship between the salesperson and the client. And I wanted to talk about trust in the context of trade shows here. Now, here's some good news. Our exhibitors really believe in the power of face-to-face to build trust amongst their customer base. They actually believe live is the most effective way of doing that. And many of them believe it's a very effective channel for building trust. But unfortunately, that trust doesn't extend to the industry itself. So we asked a series of questions to identify trust. Some of them we asked in a way that we would hope to get a positive response. Some we asked in a way that we'd hope to get a negative response. So to make it really easy to visualize on the slides, I've color-coded it. We're looking to see a really large green circle and that red circle to be as small as possible. So what do we get? Well, if we ask them, do they agree with the statement, trade shows tend to deliver the benefits promised by their salespeople. Less than half will actually agree with that. And we've got nearly 20% who disagree, who's saying, you know, you're building me up, you're making promises that you never end up delivering on. Do they think they're treated fairly by trade show organisers? Again, we've got just over half agreeing to that now, but still a large portion of our exhibitors feel that they're not sure that they're being treated fairly by us as organisers. There's also sensitivity around pricing as well, and that's either feeling that there's lots of hidden extras. The price that they agree to up front is not the price they will have ended up paying by the time they arrive on the show floor. But it's also sensitivity around price rises as well. There are exhibitors who are exhibiting at the same show year after year, and they're experiencing price rises when they're not feeling that their ROI is increasing, and they're not seeing perhaps any noticeable change in the quality or delivery of the show. And it definitely is creating sensitivity around pricing. And this is one that I think is critical at the moment as we look as to how the live events industry is going to recover. I'm going to take a wild guess, having worked in an organiser for many years and sat amongst sales teams. Many of you talk about visitor numbers as part of your value story to your prospects. And I often hear, in ex-prom campaigns, it'll be this is the most number of dentists or the most number of marketing decision makers at any event, under one roof, all in one place. Bigger, 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 bigger. We're the biggest show. Now, visitor numbers are a little bit of a smokescreen, and the way we report them doesn't always have transparency, and definitely not show to show. And our exhibitors are starting to get tired of this message. Only 26% of our exhibitors agree with the statement that trade show organisers accurately report their visitor numbers. Everyone else is not having any of it. And this is going to be critically important because we know that whatever format live events take when they restart, one of the biggest challenges will be that visitor numbers will be lowered. So there's a real opportunity here to start switching up that message and to not rely on visitor numbers and bigger, bigger, bigger being your lead story. I think it's a real opportunity to really focus in on quality and really focus in on the opportunity for return on investment for exhibitors. So does it make any difference? The great news is, yes, it absolutely does. This is a study where we interviewed about 50 trade show directors and senior salespeople around the world. And we very sneakily, in the meantime, also knew what the exhibitor net promoter score was on their shows. So they were answering questions about all sorts of things, and we actually applied their answers back to what we knew about their net promoter score. And looking at three kind of really basic areas of growth: visitor numbers, exhibitor numbers, and exhibitor revenue, I've got some good news for you. So the top line you can see here, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but that top line is all the shows who had positive exhibitor net promoter score. And this bottom line is the shows that had a negative exhibitor net promoter score. And we can see, unsurprisingly, having a positive exhibitor net promoter score means it's much easier to grow your visitor numbers. You've got much more of those shows showing modest or notable growth in their visitor numbers. Not surprising, because exhibitors are a huge source of your VisCom, and if they are prepared to really sing from the rooftops to their client base about how great this show is, you're on to a winner. Again, not super surprising that, again, in exhibitor numbers, if you've got that positive experience for your exhibitors, you're much more likely to be seeing growth, and in this case, about 4 times more likely to be seeing notable growth, so growth of over 10% in your exhibitor numbers. Hardly any of the shows that had a positive exhibitor net promoter score were in decline in their exhibitor numbers. That can't be said for these shows who had a negative score. And then exhibitor revenue. Again, unsurprisingly, you're seeing this really positive performance here. But what's quite interesting is these shows that have this positive exhibitor experience are able to grow their exhibitor revenue ahead of their growth in exhibitor numbers. So not only are they finding it easier to recruit new exhibitors, they're finding it easier to increase the spend of the exhibitors that they already have. Now, in sessions further down the line, I'm going to be sharing some of the insights about what we've seen really works from commercial teams in achieving that. But in terms of a taster today, I just want to summarise that there is room for improvement in all stages of the exhibitor journey. I'm really focusing on that as a commercial team, and really right at the start of that journey, when you're setting expectations, is critical to building trust. And we can really see the commercial opportunity that's out there for the teams that get these relationships right. I've seen some questions coming up about sharing the insights. Yes, we'll do that as much as we can. I'm going to hand back to Ralph.
Okay, Sophie, thank you so much. I'm going to keep you on the screen for a moment, if that's good with you, before we speak to David and Paul. Watching, I find that really fascinating, because obviously the picture isn't fantastic in all places, but actually there is an answer in there, which I'm kind of hearing, which is, if we can focus on trying to make these events work for the clients, then ultimately everything becomes better. And it kind of reminds me of a few stats that we often talk about at Flume. So one of the stats we often use is that 80% of the achievement of ROI for clients is down to what they do compared to what the actual exhibition company offers. But actually right now, clients, all they care about is ROI. And so the exhibition companies who are helping to drive that ROI by pre, during and after services to actually add that value are probably going to be the ones who are cutting through. Is that, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think whilst there is a lot that an exhibitor can do and not do to make the show successful, that is a huge risk for an organizer to take, especially at the moment, to just roll the dice and rely on the skills of an exhibitor. I think exhibit marketing, especially in the UK, is a skill set that's in decline. So organizers can really kind of belt and braces that by working really closely with the exhibitor to understand what does ROI look like for them, and perhaps helping and coaching along the way as well. Yeah,
and the other stat that kind of comes to mind, because my brain's a bit weird and it works like this, so I hear things like that proves this point over here. In the Challenger Sale, which is an amazing book that we sometimes talk about at Flume, and some of you guys might have read out there, there's a stat which says the third most important thing that clients want from sales experience is a salesperson who doesn't overestimate the value and doesn't underplay the difficulties of purchase. And what we mean by difficulties of purchase is that it's not easy to make this stuff work, you know, and if we pretend it is and then it doesn't, you're going to lose them. And again, this seems to really back that up, that this transparency and authenticity, and again, kind of making sure that you're not just saying it's going to be amazing, you're going to get 1 billion leads of this level, when actually they turn up and it doesn't, it has completely the opposite impact. Again, does that kind of summarize some of this stuff in your opinion?
Yeah, whilst we were just dealing with the glitches, I was asking on the chat, how many people actually exhibit at trade shows themselves? I do. We've got quite a small team at Exploring. We still head out to trade show booths, and it's really, really hard work, and it's an extended time period of work. So when you hear salespeople sort of saying, "Oh, it's a turnkey solution in a box," there's 10,000 people like trying to create that expectation that all I need to do is put up my pop-up stand, get my lead capture device out, and then roll in money. And that's just not true. And I know it's not true. I've been to enough exhibits of varying qualities that it's not a straightforward exercise. And the shows that really kind of work with you at every stage to help you do the best that you possibly can. It helps me to succeed more as an exhibitor, but it also really builds that authenticity because, the BS warning is going off as immediately as somebody says this is easy.
Yeah, 100%. I think right now people are looking at the sales process to think, can I trust this will work? And they judge whether it's going to work based on the sales experience. And almost that is the product they're buying, is the sales experience, because they're thinking, okay, if this person's being open about what is and isn't going to work and actually teach me what is and isn't going to work for the audience as well, and sharing this stuff and not just overplaying on that volume bit. That was really interesting about the visitor numbers, and actually being honest about that. You're much more likely to be trusted and them to choose you.
Yeah, my favourite piece of insight that we've produced at Explore so far, and remember I used to be an organised marketer, is there is no correlation between visitor numbers and exhibitor satisfaction. The more visitors you put through a show floor does not equal more satisfied exhibitors. Exhibitors are just as likely to have a great show in a show that has 1,000 people as 10,000 as 50,000. So I think the days of visitor numbers and constantly talking up those numbers are now behind us.
Really interesting. So Sophie, we'll bring you back in a bit later. I'm going to toggle you off, is what the phrase is up here, apparently. So I'm going to toggle the mic and toggle the video, and we're going to bring in 2 clients. So this is a first time at Flume, as is bringing in this research from Sophie. We are going to be hearing from Paul Kontonis and also David Buttle, and we're going to be essentially turning what Sophie's just said into a bit of a case study and finding out how true it is and what their actual experiences are. So we'll bring Sophie back in at the end and ask any questions. So if you do have questions for Sophie about the research, she will be back in the last 10 minutes to answer those. So please feed them in down below. Sophie, you've been awesome, and thank you so much for managing to work the text with me. 1 sec. Okay. So let me bring in David. Okay. Paul is coming on. Just trying to find David because there's about 5 of you, so I want to make sure I get the right one. David, there you go.
I'm Paul.
There's Paul. Okay, David's hopefully coming in now. Fingers crossed. Paul, how did you enjoy all of the tech glitches? That was fun, wasn't it?
Oh, lovely.
David, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. I think it's a rite of passage with any of these events. So, yeah, these things happen.
Yeah, thank you for being so forgiving. I was running around the kitchen screaming for a little while, so very pleased. I'm not doing that now. Okay, so what we're going to do, we'll get into this as quickly as possible. The way we'll do this, I'm going to try and be quiet as much as I can because I want to give you guys the voice. The reason that we asked both yourself here, Paul, and also David, was so that the people who are logged in right now can hear from your mouths what it looks like right now for someone who is buying media and events space. What's changed? How the decision-making process differ? What's working, what's not working? And also to try and break down a little bit that buying process so that the guys and girls on the end of this webinar or summit can have a think about what they can actually put into practice. So I'll ask a few questions. We'll just have a conversation. So we might go off into different tangents a little bit. I'll probably pose it to one of you and then to the other one to see how that contrasts or compares. And then we'll hand it over to everyone at the end to ask a few questions too. So ladies and gents, if you're watching, in the questions at the bottom, feed in what you want to find out as well. And if we haven't covered them in this panel bit that we're about to go through, we'll make sure we ask them afterwards. So Paul, do you want to do just a very brief intro first? Who are you? What do you do? Why are you here? And then David, we'll come to you and then I'll ask the first couple of questions.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Thanks for hanging in there. My name is Paul Kontonis, Chief Marketing Officer of an influencer marketing agency that's part of ViacomCBS. The agency is called Husay, and I've been a B2B marketer for about 25 years.
Okay, fab. David?
So I'm David Buttle. I'm the marketing director for the commercial part of the business. So that's the B2B facing the media industry. I've been in this role, I've been in the FT for almost 10 years. And before that, I was B2B marketing and sort of B2B comms, really, in various roles in the publishing and education sectors.
Okay, fab. So here we go. Okay, so what I'm really keen on doing here is just really getting under the hood. And if you guys are comfortable with it, getting as honest and black and white in terms of what you say as you like. So please don't hold back. I will try and sum up at the end what you guys have said. And I genuinely don't know where this is going to go in terms of your answers. We've had a couple of conversations before, but I want you to be as open as possible because that's what's going to be most useful for anyone who's watching. So guys at home, remember to write in your questions. So we're going to start by finding out a bit more about the change in role. David, maybe if we start with you, past 10, 12 weeks, you're a marketing, let me get this right, sorry, global marketing director.
That's right, yeah.
So what has changed for you in terms of your role in the last 10, 12 weeks since we've been going on this roller coaster? What are the biggest changes you've seen? And then obviously, Paul, I'm going to ask you the same thing in a minute. So David.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a number of dimensions to this question. I suppose first and foremost is we hit 2020 with a plan, and that plan involved quite a lot of live event activations. We had KPIs which were contingent on that kind of activity, and suddenly it became reasonably clear that wasn't going to be a channel accessible to us. So instantly, probably the first thing is that your plans are up in the air, and you don't quite know when things are going to return to a normality. So you have to create. We had to create flexibility in plans going forward that would allow us to continue to deliver against what the business required of us now, whilst being able to plug back in event activations and things like that later in the year should large-scale events become a reality. What I'd also say, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but on top of that sort of pain that you instantly feel when your plans are thrown up in the air, there's also some of the practical difficulties of operating in this kind of environment. So I've got a global team, everyone's now working from home, you've got people in the wrong parts of the country, you've got people in countries where they're not based, there's obviously discussions about budgets. We're in the media industry, and it's, you know, anyone who reads the newspaper will know that advertisers stop spending at times of economic uncertainty. So there's an impact on revenue, which has an impact on costs. So there are dimensions like that. And then there's, you know, how do we have the talent to deliver against a different type of program? So there's kind of talent dimensions to it as well. Okay.
Paul, how does that compare to you at Husay?
I just toggled my mic on and off. My neighbors decided to do some yard work. So great. As long as you can't hear it, these headphones do a great job. Yeah, I mean, to echo what David was saying, obviously we came into 2020 with a plan, and that plan is gone, right? We have to basically toss that out. And for the most part, we're considering 2020 a wash. Because as you can tell, there's a lot of stuff going on here in the US. So from a US marketing perspective, anything that we had planned is no longer the plan. We've had to reevaluate every little component that we do. And especially for the event marketing side, it's really challenged the reasons why we do what we do. Right. A big component of our event marketing in particular was the face-to-face moments we could have in the room or in the rooms with potential clients or existing clients. And by taking that out of the equation, we now have to reevaluate why are we doing these events and what value are we getting out of them when they pivot to virtual.
Okay, that's really interesting. We're definitely going to go there in terms of a conversation because a lot of the people who are watching are going to be on that journey of pivoting to virtual, whether it's from events live or maybe even from the media solutions as well. Paul, in terms of the shift in priorities, so you came in with a plan, both you and David, and then that kind of gets disrupted. What would you say the core priorities that's shifted to in terms of you as a CMO over the next year?
So we looked at, I think what we did was we took every bit of our marketing plan and we said, either we are going to cancel this for 2020, we are going to reschedule it for later in the year, or we are going to pivot it. And we went one by one down the tactical plan and said, what are we doing with these pieces, and put them in different buckets. So cancel was like push off until next year, or maybe never come back to. Reschedule was, can we do it later in the year, with a lot of uncertainty and when that's going to happen. And then the pivoting piece, the overall objectives remain the same, though our sales objectives have changed for the year.
Oh,
so say it, bro. We basically tossed out our sales objectives.
Okay, how come?
I mean, given what's going on here within the U.S. market between COVID and now with the protests and the violence that we're seeing in the streets, we are in a very, very, very different time. And we knew, given COVID the way it was going, that advertisers basically, who are our clients, right? Our clients are agencies, brand marketers. We knew that they were going to be holding on to their money till roughly Thanksgiving. We were anticipating maybe into Q4, we would start seeing some loosening of the dollars, even though we've gone into, as a media company, and in the US, we've gone into our upfront season and we've kicked that off, but full well knowing that the dollars have basically frozen for now. We had issues with clients with creative. They didn't have the right creative. They couldn't make new creative. And so that kind of caused us overall, like, boom, right? This is not business as usual. We can't take historical data and overlay on that some growth targets and say, okay, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah. Okay. So David, how does that compare to the FT in terms of the priority shift?
I mean, it sounds like the process that we went through was not radically dissimilar to Paul's, which is reassuring to hear. We looked at fundamentally the thing that was most significantly disrupted, which is live events, and we said, okay, well, we know these are cancelled. Let's assume that the rest are pushed into Q4. Even if that were the case, we're going to have a hugely congested Q4 event calendar, a limited capacity on the delegate side, and a limited capacity within my team to activate. So what are the top 5 things we'll be able to do, given budgets and resource and everything else? And then from that, we had the sort of foundation.
We just lost David there for a second. Let's just come back for a second. He was getting into it there, and we've just lost him. So let's carry on. We'll ask him that question again in a second. So I'm really keen to find out about decision making, because we looked at how things have changed in terms of kind of the focus and the sales targets that were there. But in terms of decision making, what's changed in terms of how you were making decisions 12 weeks ago, and how easy or tough that was, and who was involved, through to now?
Yeah, I think more people are involved in the decision-making process now than before, because we are even looking at, why do we need to be spending that money now? If we're not going to be able to generate the revenue, and we're not going to be able to close deals now because the clients are freezing up, right? Why should we be marketing now is what the question is. As a marketer and as a CMO, I want to market all the time. I look at this as an opportunity not to necessarily be loud and screaming, look at us during this period, but I want to keep our brands in the conversations. I want to show that our brands have context and empathy and compassion and understand what's going on, but keep our brand out there and demonstrate to people what we are doing during this time, so that when it comes back around to returning to the new normal and that sense of buying again comfortably, we are in a position of love and affinity that we can drive during this period.
Interesting. So David, sorry, we lost you for a second there. I was asking Paul just around how the decisions are getting made. And what's interesting, Paul, what you're talking about there is that actually you were very keen and have been very keen to keep this stuff going. But there's also a piece there around getting the message right in terms of empathy. Just in terms of that message and how important that was to any kind of decisions you made around marketing. Tell us about the importance of that message, because we often talk about it at Flume, that actually the most important thing for CMOs, any marketers out there, should be around understanding what the audience need in terms of the messaging and kind of adapting to that based on their psychographics and their situation. That message bit, can you just tap into that a tiny bit? And then David, we'll come back to you on what we were talking about before.
Absolutely. So we were in a position at the beginning of this year of integrating Viacom with CBS into the new ViacomCBS. And what we had determined would be the right messaging leading into COVID, before we knew the full extent of COVID, did not feel right in the first 6 to 8 weeks of the pandemic here within the US. It just did not feel like it was the right message. It felt tone deaf.
Yeah.
As we have started to come out and start reopening, it started to feel like the right message. And we said, you know what, maybe we can go with this after all, and we can put put out a version of it that is one of, hey, inspiration, and one of, we can do this together. Given now what's happening with Black Lives Matter, and with needing to show solidarity with our Black colleagues and show that we care about what's happening in the US, it's difficult to do again. Now we've thrown another monkey wrench into the situation, another little glitch in there that we now have to reevaluate and back off a little bit, change our tone, change our message before we come back into market.
Yeah, so actually what kind of leads, it's an interesting one, because the order you're talking about, you're not talking about the platforms at all that you're choosing, you're talking about the message.
Yeah.
Which
primary
I know
first is the message.
Yeah, because without the message, you can't choose a platform, right?
Correct.
But often, I think the sales side of things, we do it the other way around. We're like, we've got a platform to sell, buy it. But actually, unless the client is 100% focused and confident that that is the right message, especially now when the audience is so sensitive, then they can't buy any platform, right?
Yep.
Okay. So, David, we lost you before. If you could just summarize, you were talking about kind of the change in priorities, but also keen on finding your take on how decisions are being made right now in your business around media and events.
So to summarize my final point, I think I was just explaining the sort of process by which we ended up with a contingency plan for the team, and that was effectively looking at what we would do if things were to take place in Q4, start filling the gaps that would have left, and then have an understanding that if those activations in Q4 are no longer possible, what we would subsequently drop into the plan in order that we had something like a comprehensive set of activities that would deliver against the objectives that the team has. And what was the second part of the question? Sorry.
So just in terms of decision making, because we've seen quite a few changes in decision making, often at the board level are getting a lot more involved. There's always, in the last 6-7 years, in theory, if you believe the research, been 6.8 people involved in decision making process in B2B. Now, I don't know if you've got 6.8 or if it's 5 or it's a 10, but keen to find out about that driving decisions, because I think often in sales it can feel like we're just talking to one person, but actually there's you've got to convince a whole group and get a watertight business case. So I'm just keen on kind of what that looks like now compared to 12 weeks ago.
Well, I mean, I would say that in our business, at least, the formal sign-off processes for budgets haven't changed, but everything is kind of mired in the difficulty of remote working and those conversations that you kind of have with someone, someone who's tangentially involved in a decision, a technical person who might have to implement a new solution that you're bringing in, or a team that might be involved in an event activation, sort of, a subscription team for us that might be on the sort of periphery of an event activation. You can't have those informal conversations. So everything's kind of running through treacle to an extent. So whilst the formal processes are still broadly the same, I still sign off on, I don't have to go to someone else to get that's not changed, but it's harder to get stuff through because of the way that we're working now.
Interesting. So you got the challenges remotely in terms of kind of almost the implementation of some of this stuff, right? And actually kind of making it work. Are there any other, David, still for you, is there any other kind of core things that are likely to stop decisions going through? Or if a salesperson came to you and gave you a good idea, you thought, that might work. Are there any other kind of barriers there now that are likely to hold that back?
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the appetite for risk amongst buyers is lower. I would say, I speak for myself, we're having to do more with less. We're already having to sort of push into different channels to fill gaps. And am I going to take a punt on something which is going to, it could deliver a big upside, but actually it could make me look pretty silly?
Yeah,
possibly not. You're going to want to make sure that you're going to get everything it's possibly stating the obvious, but the focus on ROI is going to be greater than ever before. And it is for me when I'm thinking about investment decisions. Your appetite for risk is lower right now because you've got less wriggle room.
So Paul, what's your take on that in terms of kind of what slows down decisions and how easy they are to push through now?
So I think you've got two things. One is you always have to recognize when you are selling is that when you are selling into an organization, whoever is that decision maker has to feel like you are going to be the right choice if things even go bad. What I mean is this. If you were back in let's say the mid to late 90s, and you decided to do an Oracle implementation for your ERP, which we don't even talk about that much anymore, and you were to overspend in millions of dollars to do it, no one, or PeopleSoft back then, no one would ever criticize you, even if it failed miserably. Or if you decided to buy all IBM laptops a long time ago for your sales teams or your teams, no one would ever criticize you, even though they were pieces of shit. No one can, because it was big brands. It was IBM, it was PeopleSoft, it was Oracle. Yeah. You went with these, well-known brands. It's like right now, if you go to do something at Cannes, everyone loves to go to Cannes Lions, right? Let's in the media industry. Let's go to Cannes Lion. No one ever questions the decision to be there because it is this pinnacle marquee moment. When you are pitching solutions, opportunities, events that are not as well known, you have to make that other person feel that you've got their back, you're going to cover them, and this cannot go wrong. And that ties into David's appetite for risk, because the appetite for risk is even less than before. You have to really make them feel secure in their choice. Really make them feel like you've got them, you are buttoned up to a T, and there is no chance that this is going to not deliver the way it's expected to deliver. And if there is any risk at all, you're going to cover them and make them even wholer than they were whole before. So that's one. The other one is the switching costs are incredibly high right now. So if I'm comfortable and I always work with one vendor and one partner, I'm probably not going to have a lot of interest in hearing why you might be better. Don't tell me that you're better. I'm here right now. I'm here. My team is trained on it. Everyone is remote. The idea of switching, I was thinking about this last night in preparation for this. The idea of switching to any type of platform, a new email marketing platform, a new CRM, a new anything, new lead gen program. I get gazillion lead gen things through LinkedIn. It's absurd right now. I have teams remotely working. I don't have the capacity or the even understanding of how I would train everyone on a new platform. How would I migrate everyone to a new platform? Even though realistically, the only difference is we're not in the same proximity. But the concept is so foreign to me right now that you have to recognize that switching costs are through the roof.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things there that we talk about at Flume, which is one is the biggest challenge or competitor that salespeople tend to have is the status quo that the client is currently working with. Whatever the client's doing at the moment is going to be easier in most cases to stick with. And that's kind of what you're selling against. And there needs to be a compelling reason to change now if you're going to expect the client to take on that risk of doing something new, put their head above the parapet and say, hey, I'm going to do something risky, but also the implementation costs of these things. So there needs to be, if they're going to ever convince you guys to do something new compared to what you're used to, there needs to be a very compelling argument why you need to do something brand new, right? But I think it's interesting that this kind of implementation bits come out from both of you, kind of actually making sure that you guys can implement this stuff in the right way, in the easiest way. I think it's really key, and maybe comes back to what Sophie was talking about before around driving ROI, because often the promise is this is going to be easy, it's great, use it. But actually when it comes down to it, making this stuff work can be tough. And what we're seeing is when the sales teams can position themselves as the people who aren't just saying, here's what we've got, but actually we're going to make what we've got work for you and build that trust, then that is a different level of sales, I suppose, where you're selling an outcome and almost putting your neck on the line a bit for the client, saying, I'm here to make this work with you, as opposed to here, give it a go, good luck.
And I think the language of better, and listening to you talk, for me, the language of better right now does not work.
Yeah.
I might pay attention to something that's completely different or takes into account what the changing environment is. I will have a little bit more appetite to hear about something completely different than I will to hear about something that's just better than what I'm doing. And I love the analogy of putting your head above the parapet. You put your head up there, it's off. Yeah. Right. If you're taking a very big risk right now doing that, and you're also saying that, oh, we didn't do it the right way before, and now we want to switch. And given the way everything is, it's the last thing people want to do is expose themselves.
So one final question on this before I go on to the actual sales approaches teams could use with clients that might help you guys or clients make it easier to say yes. If you had two options, so obviously one option is do nothing, but let's say there's two options you were looking at, which was maybe one, I'm making this up, was a virtual event. One was, which might be a webinar sponsorship as an example. One might be to do some, making this up, an MPU advertising or a banner advertisement or whatever it might be, some more traditional advertising. They're just two random examples. What would you consider? What are the criteria you would look at personally to think, which one do I choose? Which one's best? For you guys right now, what are the key considerations when choosing a marketing solution, and why do you choose one over the other? David, have you got any thoughts on that?
I mean, yeah, I have. I mean, so I think probably for me that one of the interesting points around this is the fact that there's been convergence between, you sponsor a digital event and you get a pre-roll and maybe you get some branding around it and a speaker. Great. That's actually not a radically different solution from a traditional digital advertising solution. So there's definitely convergence there. I think the challenge, probably what you need to do as a marketer is take a couple of steps back and think, what was I doing the live event for? And for us, the hardest thing to replicate through a digital event that we can do in a live event is kind of proper relationship development. We can talking here, there's 480 people on this call, that's amazing. But it's hard to develop a relationship with someone and in a sort of make someone feel special about your brand, and actually build a connection. And so that's kind of the gap that I think is hardest to fill. So there's definitely been convergence between some of the functions of live events, digital events, and digital advertising, but there's big bits that they can't do. And someone who, if you can crack that as a salesperson and crack that as a product owner and event owner, then that's your route through, right? Because you can move your money. If you're doing an event activation for branding, you can drop that somewhere else. Fine, that's gonna get you in front of eyeballs. What you can't do is easily, at least, is create a real connection and build relationships.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that, because I can see this guy who's in the chat over here, this Richard Miles guy, whoever this guy is. I know he's the type of guy who's going to come after me at the end of a panel and wait for me to come off the stage and be there with his card and be like, "Hey, Paul, I'd like to talk to you about that kind of thing," right, Richard? I think so. And you can't do that now. How do I tap somebody and say, "Hey, let me give you my card. Is it okay if I can call you?" All that part is gone. And I know that there's at least 2 major publishers within the US right now that are trying to figure out how to do that in their virtual events. And it's very poor right now. It just that component is gone.
Okay. So let's move on to as Richard's just responded, let's move on to the sales experience. So the ladies and gents who will be watching this come from a mix of different companies, sizes, but also in terms of what they sell. But one similarity is most of them have a commercial aspect in their mind right now, which is how do we work with clients in a better way to make more money. So the sales process, if we break it down really, really basically, or the buying process for you guys, first bit, if we look at it, is who do you engage with? Second bit is the conversation you have with the sales team or person. And the third bit is kind of how do you drive these decisions through your business? If we kind of put them into those 3 chronological bits, engaging with, having a conversation with, and driving it through the business, I'm just keen to kind of break that down a tiny bit. So if we look at the engaging bit, so basically if a salesperson, maybe Paul, if we look at you, if a salesperson was to contact you, you did not know this salesperson before this contact, whether it's email, whether it's phone, whether it's WhatsApp, whatever they're using, right? what's the most important stuff? Because it is incredibly difficult, as everyone who is watching this probably knows, to connect with new people right now. And it's difficult to get any time because you guys are busier than ever. What is your experience of kind of who would you engage with, open up a new relationship with, have a conversation with, and what would they need to do and what doesn't work? We're looking for kind of do's and don'ts here. Any thoughts, Paul?
Well, I would do what Elena just did and say I'm phenomenal. And then maybe I'll be like, oh, yeah, great. Let's connect over LinkedIn and let's talk a little bit. That always works. No.
Well done,
I think, look, more than ever, you have to be aware of the methods that you're using to connect to people and how you're connecting to them and what value you're bringing them. This is a great way. Doing something like this is something that, you know, we were introduced by a mutual contact who said this might be a good conversation to be a part of. And I was like, yeah, sure. This is great. Now you're in my consideration set for, oh, I'm going to do this with my sales team. Let me connect you to our head of sales training and let's see if maybe we can have this conversation. So doing this where you try to, add value to your potential target and help elevate them and what they're thinking about and what they like to talk about. Again, that to me cuts through way better than a message on LinkedIn that's going to tell me that you have a better lead generation program and you can help me do this. My favorite thing is on LinkedIn, I have that I'm a soccer coach because I've been coaching soccer here in the US for about 10 years at a big academy here in New York. And I get messages from people who are trying to get more clients for business coaches. I see that you're a coach. We can help you get more business clients for coaching. I'm like, you have no clue what kind of coaching I'm doing. Like they're just picking off these random words out of my LinkedIn and trying to hit me with things that make absolutely zero sense. Yep. So more than ever, it's a lot harder to reach people in a cold way. And definitely don't call cell phones out of nowhere and leave messages saying, you know, hey, let's talk about this. Let's make a time. You can contact me here and whatever. It's horrible. Absolutely horrible.
That's interesting. So can I just clarify something there? So one of the words that I took from that was the word elevate. So you talked about someone coming and elevating you. And one of the stats out there is that it's 2 times more likely a buyer will buy off you, put you into consideration stage, advocate for you internally, advocate for you externally, and pay a premium if they can see what is in it for them in their role. So you as a CMO, thinking about what are your priorities, what do you care about personally as a CMO compared to not necessarily the company you're working for. And this idea of elevating you, I just wanted to clarify that. How important is that they kind of tap into what you personally care about within your role, Paul, in terms of that intro?
Well, just using me as an example, then I'll use an external example, is I've written a couple of articles on LinkedIn called The Compendium of Crappy Cold Emails, where I specifically rat out people who are sending me the worst emails and messages possible that are totally cold and have no chance of ever succeeding. So I personally have an interest in this topic. So for me, this is great because I love talking about it. But I'll use that as an example of what we do in our marketing is we, especially in our content marketing, is we look for every opportunity to bring our partners, our clients' voices about and expertise into the marketplace in editorial content that we create. So what do I mean by that? If we go and have the opportunity to sponsor an event and we are going to moderate a conversation and we're going to bring in the CMO from one of our partner brands, one of our client brands, the conversation is about them. The conversation is not about us. We put them up on stage. We make them look as great as possible. We then write the article that coincides with that is all about their POV. It just happens to be that we were the moderator and we put it together. That's an inconsequential detail, but I'm going to put them at the forefront. With ANA, one example I'll give with Association of National Advertisers here in the US, which is the big trade organization for brand marketers. Every year for the last 4 years, I've brought a major celebrity to have conversations with CMOs. So 2 years ago, I brought in LL Cool J to speak with CMOs about how inclusion drives growth in the business. Now, you would envision that the content afterwards would be LL Cool J, LL Cool J. It was not. It was Mark Pritchard talks about why inclusion drives growth in the industry. He just happened to be interviewed by LL Cool J. We even did that. We took this celebrity, put him alongside the CMO, made them go, wow, this is the coolest thing ever, and then talked about the CMO. We didn't talk about the celebrity, even though he added incredible value to the conversation. So to me, that's the word elevate, is make them look good. And so what David is saying, I'll talk for David. He's saying, right, okay, you can't hear me. Uh-oh.
I can't
David,
hear Raoul.
what that's what Raoul's saying. David, what do you think about that?
So who would I engage with at the moment? So I would definitely echo your points around sort of telephone calls, like generic LinkedIn. I mean, it's there's a lot of terrible stuff out there, and actually there has definitely been an uptick in that stuff over the last 12 weeks. As I imagine there's a lot of people out there, understandably, with targets to hit and are finding it harder to get traction. But you can see you're sort of inundated with this stuff. And I think probably the barrier to engage is higher now than it's ever been before. What would I say works? I mean, I think a personal introduction. The last couple of new suppliers we worked with were via a personal introduction from someone I trusted who recommended that solution in relation to a specific problem they knew we had at the moment. So that's sort of the easiest way in. If that's obviously not scalable, really, it's kind of you rely on happenstance. So in the absence of that, I would say, I mean, it's difficult, but there are probably relating as strongly as possible your offering to the problems being faced by your client. That sounds sort of so anodyne, but it's true. If you can relate it strongly to the challenge that your clients or potential clients are facing, then that's your route in. And I think probably now there's some reasonably universal client problems that clients are facing around some of the things we've already discussed and some of the disruptions that have struck us. So that's the route in. And then if it's probably you're going to knock on more sort of closed doors than you will knock on doors that are open to you. But what I would say is at that first stage, and we may go on to discuss this a little in a second, Raoul, it's about listening. Far too often you get people coming in, and again, this is a slightly trite point, but people who come in and just leave the product, and actually, yeah, your position may be similar in nature to one of your competitors or whoever else they've worked with, but actually there are going to be unique characteristics to that, and be that, you know, it could be regional, it could be to the particular market, whatever. So someone who actually comes in and properly listens to strategically where the business is going, what are the specific challenges you're facing right at that moment, and then go away and think about how the product or whatever it is they're trying to shift maps into that without just jumping straight in.
Raoul, are you back?
Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
We can.
Can you hear me? Not.
We can. Yeah. Did you catch Paul's English accent?
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was impressive. I did hear it, but I know you didn't hear me. So thank you for keeping it going, Paul. You're a great host. You can still hear me, right?
Yeah, just about.
Yeah.
You might want to turn off the. Oh no!
So let's keep David. There is something I want to follow up with you on while Raoul figures that out. You said getting introduced by somebody, right?
Yeah,
my internet is.
What if they can't get introduced by somebody? And let's talk about LinkedIn, because somebody also wrote about it in LinkedIn message. And man, like, you probably get a ton. I get a ton. If somebody doesn't have that direct connection, what do you like when they reach out to you? How they reach out to you? What have you ever responded to?
So it has to. There's certain things which would make me more likely to reply, to respond, and absolutely hands up like everyone else. I probably respond to one in 100 or less. But if it relates specifically to something that's an acute pain point for me and is on my mind at that moment, then that's probably it, right? That's the one thing I might say. Oh, this sounds interesting. Drop me a note.
Right.
How do you predict that when you're on the sell side?
Exactly.
That's really, really tough. Yeah, I suppose there's research. I mean, clearly there's research that can feed into that kind of intelligence, but also you probably got to recognize that your hit rate isn't going to be astronomically high. But the more data that you can feed in, and the more insight that you can feed into those kind of methods of outreach, and I suppose testing and learning, you're probably going to increase your chances of success. Would you agree with that, Paul?
Yeah, totally. That alignment you're talking about is like the perfect solar and lunar eclipse at the same time, right?
Right.
Your message in my inbox at the exact moment I'm thinking about doing something. I think what would we have to help people solve for is if they do not have that connection. So if somebody says, hey, I'm a good friend of David's and we want to talk to you about how you're doing this, I'm gonna say, yeah, totally. David's a great guy. We did this panel together. Yeah, let me hear what he says. Right. Let me hear what they have to say. But if they don't have that connection, right, what are some of the things? And Raul, I don't know if we can hear you now, but what are some of the things that they can do when they don't have that connection to get that in there?
Can you hear me? Just a check.
We can. Yeah, we can hear you.
If I cut out again, what will be amazing is you've been doing a brilliant job without me, so thank you so much. If you could talk about the conversation a salesperson would need to have with you, but also how to drive decisions in your business, that would be amazing, i.e. what they could do. And if I don't come back, there's questions at the bottom which you also need to answer, just so you know.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Homework.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, guys. It's just not ideal. So can I ask you guys a question? You might have just answered it just then, so apologies if you had. But David, you talked about before this listening piece and going into the actual conversation that you need a salesperson to have with you. We always talk about the idea of listening deeply to understand strategic needs, but also the idea of teaching and sharing insights around audiences and what works and what doesn't work to help the market make better decisions.
Yeah.
David, what's your take on that before I lose my connection again?
Yeah. So, I mean, as I said, I mean, listening is absolutely fundamental. There's nothing more off-putting than someone who starts down a route.
Did you hear that?
Can you hear me? Is that
Yep, we're good. Keep going, David.
There's nothing more frustrating than when someone starts down.
I don't know if you heard that or not.
No, it's not right, and you're like, just stop now, because you're going down a different route, and this could actually be a useful conversation. So I think it needs to start with listening, and then, as you said, Raul, if you can bring something of value into that conversation, whether it ends up at a sale or not, and be that customer research, a case study of something.
Yeah, I can
previously. That would, I think it's probably sequential in that way. It's listening, then bringing insight into that sales process as well, and articulating the benefits of whatever it is you're talking about in product or service, in relation to that. What is the strategic issue being faced by this person that they articulated at the outset?
Right. I think I learned very quickly. My first job out of college was for a pharmaceutical company. I had a bag full of drugs that I was going to the doctor to try to convince them to use more Prozac in their elderly patients. And before I made my first call, I remember my sales lead, my boss at the time, said, remember, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. You need to listen twice as much as you talk. And it's very hard to do this. It's great to do this in a one-on-one. It's great to do this in a meeting where you get the clients to talk absolutely as much as possible. It's incredibly difficult to do if you do not have that in. And I'm going to go back to that in, because if somebody has an in with me, that means they're vetted, they're trusted. I kind of will take less data from them. I'm okay with that. I don't need the full dog and pony show and a tremendous amount of data and proving this and proving that. I'm a little bit more forthcoming. I'm a little bit more generous with my time. I'm a little bit more accommodating when it's total stranger coming in. And I think a lot of times we get caught as salespeople going down these roads where, what do you know about working with media companies? Oh, this is our data on media companies. Oh, well, what do you know about media companies that are entertainment based? Oh, here's all our data. Oh, what do you know about media companies that are entertainment based that work with agencies? Oh, here's all our data. Like people keep driving deeper and deeper and deeper. And then that's when you are not making it click because you're just being asked for more and more and more.
Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to do, guys, we're going to dive into some questions. I'm going to bring Sophie in. And this is slightly just in case I cut off again. So you kind of can go to the questions yourself, but I will hopefully stay in. So I'm going to bring Sophie back in. Sophie, who took us through the research before. Fingers crossed.
Hey, Sophie.
Sophie, how you doing? Can you hear us, Sophie?
I can hear you great, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, well, that's at least you've got that working. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask a couple of the questions that the audience have been sending in. We'll start with the first one, and anyone who wants to answer this, put your hand up and go for it. So the first one, the biggest one by quite a big margin, 22 votes this has had. What is the most effective cut-through message communication at the moment? How do you prefer to be contacted? David, what's your take on that one? What's the most effective cut-through message communication at the moment? How do you prefer to be contacted?
So I suppose of everything, the things I'm probably more likely to reply to would be a personal email, a one-to-one email, an actual personal email, not one that has the sort of pretense of personalization, but is sent by a bot. I mean, I think the ideal is it's an introduction from someone, because you then are already, as Paul brilliantly articulated, you're already sort of further ahead in the trust rankings. You know, you're going to give more time to that person. In terms of message, it needs to relate to me, not to them. That's again a slightly trite point, but you know, probably a lot of people in my position at the moment are thinking about, how do I deliver a program with less? How do I replace what live events do for me? How do I manage a disparate team who are new to home working? There's kind of universal issues that people are facing. So pegging stuff to those, I think is probably a useful starting point. And testing, you know, it's going to be to some extent a scale game. You know, use that data that you're getting back from those attempts to outreach and feed it back into the machine to test it.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So rule number one is make it about you, not them. Rule number two is personalize it to the individual, and rule number three is you kind of using buyer personas, kind of anticipate and hypothesize the likely challenges that someone in your position are likely to be facing in the priorities, and use those as a potential way in, and test it and measure it as you go through and shift as you learn.
Yeah, I would say that would be a reasonable assertion. Yeah.
Okay, Paul, any variants on that?
Watch the language you use, because there's a lot of really poorly written sales messages out there that are using questions like, are you having trouble with your CRM? Where, you know, if the whole thing is a setup for their CRM product, right? So just please review your copy and make it so that it doesn't seem like it's all full of gotcha questions, because yes or no questions, people will answer no 60-70% of the time. I love going after advertisers that do that. They'll do a poll in Instagram. It'll be like, do you think your mattress is getting worn out? Yes or no? And I'm like, no. Happy, no. And that's what most people do. So avoid those yes or no questions. The personal email is great. And I know some tools, mail, merging tools are really good for mail, and they make it look like it's really genuine. But I love it all the time, because we're Husay in LinkedIn, we're Husay, a ViacomCBS company. And so I'll get an email that's like, hi, Paul, I know at Husay, ViacomCBS company, you guys are, and I'm like, yeah, no, you just merged that. That's not real. That's like when you get a letter in the mail and it's printed and you lick your finger and you rub it on the signature and the ink smears too easily because it's printed. It doesn't smear. So that means it was printed with a laser printer versus a real signature.
It's interesting. So you're almost proactively looking for whether this is authentic and genuine and honest. That's really interesting. Okay, so we've got another question that kind of links into this. Which is the second question here, which is, what are the most innovative methods that salespeople have used to reach out to you, and what stands out as the most effective? So are there any that you can remember over the past 12 or so weeks that you think, wow, that one really worked? And are there any things that made that work? It might just be almost a case study of what you've just talked about, but any that stand out, and Sophie as well, any that stand out for you in a second. So Paul or David, first off?
Paul, I'll let you. There's nothing, to be honest. I can't. I've not started working with any new suppliers in the since this has happened, because
Same here.
Yeah, my time is, and I'm sure it's the same for Paul. My time has been stretched to keep the train on the tracks. Really.
Sure. Sophie, anything you'd want to add?
I think I have seen some good stuff come through where they've really offered something of value. They've spent their time demonstrating their expertise rather than telling me how great they are. They've offered me something that they've put together that really showcases that. So media brands or events, they've really demonstrated their expertise in that particular community or market to send me something. And I'm like, oh yeah, this teaches me something. This informs my thinking now about how we might move forward with this market. Yeah, so something that's really of value.
Yeah.
Wait, Raul, I want to say, I realized what the best sales thing has been. This.
Hey, why?
Because a mutual connection connected us, that elevated you guys in my mind as being respectable, good people, good to do business with. I was interested in the opportunity. I am here, and I am also a potential buyer. So I look at this and say, this is a perfect example of how to cut through. You got the connection, you connected to me with, have some interest, and you brought me within this conversation, and boom. This worked.
Love it. You've just exposed us there. Sorry about that. God damn it!
I just realized it.
So we've got tons of questions. Let's keep going through. So we have a lot of them are about ultimate. There's one here, ultimate peeves. So what is your ultimate peeve when it comes peeve? Means issue, just in case the terminology doesn't work. So what is your ultimate peeve when it comes to a salesperson approaching you with a promotional activity? So let's say they come to you saying, we've got an amazing new virtual event. What is the worst way they could do that? David, any thoughts?
For me, and it's a personal, I take peeve as kind of a slightly personal thing that pisses me off. That is the telephone call. It is not of this era. It is so interruptive. So whenever someone phones me, I'm firstly, how did you get my number? And then secondly, send me a fucking email, pardon my language. And
anyone who's offended by David's language, then sorry.
I'll have a look at it on my own terms, like, and when I get round to it. So that's my personal biggest peeve.
Interesting. So the phone call. What about you, Paul?
Oh, my favorite is, and if you are not the person who makes the marketing decisions, please connect me to that person.
Tell me about that, because so many people do that. Why does
God, they do it all the time. Hi, Paul. I want to tell you about our great marketing services and event services. But if you're not the right person, let us know who is. I'm the chief marketing officer at the organization. Who else would there be? You know, like, just it'll be that blatant. I'm using a really blatant example, but it'll be that blatant, and you're like, I know you're just using this language to use this language, but do you actually know who you're contacting?
Yeah. Funny. So, well, not funny, quite scary actually. But how about you, Sophie?
I think it would be the salesperson who likes to use the first 5 minutes of the call to tell me that I'm doing my job badly. All the things I could be doing, how my website could be better, or how I don't really understand to connect with my customers. I'm like, sure, you didn't get my name right, but please tell me more about how I can do my job better.
Love it. So personal insight to begin a relationship.
That is, Sophie, that is so true. That's the idea of when they come to you and say when they want to pitch you the idea of doing something better, basically they're telling you you're doing your job terribly.
Yeah.
Where we have a better way of doing this better. Well, so what? Am I not doing a very good job? Yeah, no, spot on.
Interesting. So I've got another one here, which is about the decision-making process. When considering new opportunities or business solutions, how has your internal decision-making process changed since the crisis? So we did kind of touch on this a bit before, but a specific wording of it. So how's the internal decision-making process changed since the crisis when you're choosing a new solution? Any thoughts on that one, David?
I think I covered this one. Yes, so in terms of the formal process, nothing's changed, but there are peculiarities associated with how we're all working now, which have changed the reality of that process. And then probably on top of that, there's the idea that there's, budgets are smaller this year. There's less active. We'll be doing less stuff, and therefore there's going to be more scrutiny applied to investment decisions and such like.
Okay. Anything to add, guys? No. Okay.
No, I'd say he's right that the decision-making process hasn't changed. I think this new question has come up in the process of, can we do that now? Can we spend that money now? Can we? Which never was a question before of, can we do that? And that's the new question.
When you say can we, is it that, are we going to be okay doing that? What's the kind of background to that?
Yeah, exactly. Are we safe doing this? Do we have the okay to spend money now? Can we greenlight something new? Because there's a sense of, what are we doing? When are we going to go back to the office? When's the market going to relax? What's happening with everyone's world? And can we do this now?
Interesting. So one of the questions that have come up just now from Sajida, hi Sajida, is about driving decisions through the other internal stakeholders. So again, if you believe the research, which is about 4 or 5 years old now, and I think the numbers are going up, but on average 6.8 people in the decision-making process, which in theory means there's 5.8 other people above or to the side or below you that would see whatever proposal it is. The question that's come from Sajida is, let's get it the right phrasing. How can a salesperson help with overcoming internal stakeholder objections when trying something new? So let's say, David, you thought this is a great option. I think we should do it. But actually you put it to other people, whether they're above, below equivalent level. And they're like, no, don't want to do that. These internal stakeholder questions or objections often are the things that slow down or stop decisions going through. Anything that salespeople can do. We often talk about the importance of a proposal that actually creates a watertight business case and helping to kind of understand that decision-making process before your client, you guys go through it. But I don't know from your perspective, actually, what would make a difference that salespeople could do?
I mean, it varies it would vary from supplier to supplier. I mean, I think probably it's useful to be mindful of the fact that your kind of key champion on the business is the person who stands to win if it's a success and stands to lose if it's a failure. But the people on the periphery probably don't stand to gain that much. If it's someone who actually it just means a bit more work and it doesn't help them fulfill their objective, then it's probably useful to be mindful of their perspective in relation to that procurement, because for them actually the conversation might be about building a relationship and then demonstrating this is actually a really easy implementation. So it's, I think probably as a general principle, I would suggest that having a view on what the motivation of these people on the periphery, on the stakeholders to a decision, what their motivation is, how invested are they, what do they want out of this? Do they want, some people just want an easy, this not to cause them any hassle, which is a valid, if they've got a ton of other stuff going on over here, that's their main job. Then if you're mindful of that as a salesperson, then, you can go into those conversations and reassure them in the right way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yourself, Paul?
I always love when people give me the tools I need to sell it internally. Ooh. And one of the simplest things is give me the reasons, the benefits of working with you when we're at that point when I have to sell it internally in a PowerPoint that I can customize, that I can put within our template, that I can use to create a presentation internally versus me sending around a PDF of something you've already created that's all about you. Help me phrase it strategically, help me map it all to our objectives, and then in a format that I can have someone on my team put it into a presentation that we're going to present to the leadership and say, this is why we're doing this.
Really interesting. So actually presentations, because we often talk about at Flume that for a lot of clients, presentations aren't a great thing because unless you're presenting them or they're being presented by someone, then actually sometimes like a PDF or a document would be a better option. But for you, actually PowerPoint would be the best option.
When I'm ready to present to other people, right?
Yeah.
So give me those assets in a usable format so I can take them apart, put them within my template, within my marketing template to present internally to make me look good and my team look good from making this decision.
Okay, so Sophie, what's your view on this one? Because it's a biggie. Because ultimately, a lot of the salespeople actually almost stop at this point, and they just send through a contract saying this is what it is. But actually, this is the toughest part for most buyers, is getting it through this decision-making process, and that's where most deals die, is because the decision-making group can't agree to do one thing or another, so nothing happens. What was your take, Sophie?
I think it's particularly interesting in the context of live events as well, because delivering a live event from an exhibitor's point of view takes a huge number of stakeholders. So you've got the person who could be maybe a senior sales, a commercial director, or a senior marketing person that signs that contract. But you think about all the other people on an exhibitor side who have to pull together to deliver an event really well on the day. I think commercial teams need to realise that the sale doesn't stop once the deal is signed. If there's an internal sell to do, if you're going to get that ROI, which is what's going to bring the business back next time, what can you do to drive that internal sell?
Yeah. So one of the quotes we often use or taglines around this bit is that the biggest mistake salespeople often make around this kind of selling on bit is they write the proposal or the business case for the person they've already spoken to. So kind of you guys assuming, well, you guys already know what it's going to do. You guys are already bought in. So we just kind of send through, here you go, that's the package. But actually, right, it's about helping create this internal case for everyone else and understanding what that decision-making process is, who are going to be motivated to push it, who the blockers might be, and creating it and giving it in a way, like Paul said, that makes it easy for you guys to sell on, kind of creating tools that make that easy, I think is a big lesson here. So I'm going to ask just two more questions, and then we're going to have to cut this off. I could go on for ages, but I appreciate we're well over time. So apologies, and thank you for hanging on, guys. There's a couple more questions I want to just put out to you guys. So number one is in terms of from Katie, in terms of your budgets, do you think live events will happen, and how comfortable do you feel spending on them? What would make you buy? This is about 20 questions in one. What would make you buy? What ROI do you look at for virtual events, and how do you feel about hybrid events? Sum that up. What's your take on hybrid, virtual, and live events, and what would make you choose one over the other? Broadly is the question. Any views on that one, David?
So take on, I don't really know what a hybrid event is. So presumably a combination of live and I've never seen one. Yeah. Right. Yeah, so I haven't really given a huge amount of thought to that. I look at, I think digital events can be fantastic for delivering some of those sort of reaching a broader audience, brand recognition, some of those upper funnel objectives. They and the gaps really for us are around that, that nurturing, that relationship piece. So that's what I say. Will they happen this year? I think it's hard, sitting where we are now, to imagine something at the scale of the events that we engage with, a Cannes Lion or an ad week happening this year. Really, it's hard to see that. So we're planning for how we would deliver what we need to deliver in the absence of those, and hoping that some of those big industry gatherings do take place.
What do I think? At least I'm not crazy. Okay, so I've got two things I want to talk about. Three actually, about hybrid events. I think that's a really good point. We spotted how David didn't even recognise that terminology. We're not great as an industry sometimes about talking the language that our clients use. We talk on our own special expo industry talk. And that's only going to get worse as we're offering different things. The second I want to talk about virtual is we're seeing quite a lot of organisers sort of see it as a poor substitute. We'll do virtual events for now, but we can't wait till the real deal comes back, and that's our live events. We're scared as an industry to acknowledge that there are some things that virtual events can offer really, really well. Maybe they don't replace live events, but they're not a poor substitute. They've got value in their own right. Because what I see them doing really well, we talked about intention. When is somebody intending to buy? So not just their demographics, but their psychographics. They're moving through a buying process. And they're the highest quality visitor you could connect an exhibitor with, is somebody who's ready to buy. And what I, as a potential exhibitor, would be prepared to pay the most for. Virtual events are a really great way of funneling people towards your live event and understanding what their intentions are, what they're interested in, what sort of content they're going to interact in. So you've got this really lovely virtuous circle where you're building a stream of content that will help you to really understand who your high quality visitors would be and how you can connect them to the right exhibitors. So they've got a huge role to play in the value chain, and I think as an industry we would be much poorer if we allow virtual to become just that fad we did in 2020 and it never gets talked about again.
Okay, so we're just trying to pull Paul back in now. Paul, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I can't see you, but that's okay.
Apparently people couldn't see you either, so I'm hoping that now works. We've got one final question and then we're going to be have to close up. So Sophie, there's quite a few questions specifically for you, which I'm wondering if we can pick up offline on this one. I'll just do one of them actually quickly, and then we'll do one more. To Sophie on declining NPS, as an efficiency measure, tech allows organisers to transfer the logistical pre-show burden increasingly to the exhibitors. Is this a source of frustration and resentment? Sales teams don't really get involved in all this in this aspect anymore.
Yeah, I think what you can say is things like virtual exhibitor manuals and things like that. I think in some instances, yes, they're improving experience because that's sometimes you still have to send faxes in. So we're improving off a low base, but I still think the user experience isn't great. And our exhibitors are telling us that this could be a lot better. But what an exhibitor manual will never do is really understand what has motivated that company to come to that show. What does success look like for them? So they take a bit of that burden of saying, well, I can order my electrics more easily, for example. But it doesn't help me know how to effectively activate at that show. Now, in some organisers, that does fall outside the responsibility of the commercial team. And I think often it falls between. It could be the marketers or the ops who have to try and pick up on that. I don't think that's great. I think there needs to be some connectivity and some ownership of that relationship for it to be high quality. I know that every organiser does it differently, but I think if you're like, right, here's a login, guys, bye, you're not going to get a great customer experience.
Yeah. Okay. So final question. So there's kind of, I'm going to connect two here. One is about something Sophie said earlier in the presentation, which is the value of face-to-face in building trust. And how do we kind of do that virtually? But there's another piece here, which is about any strong virtual experiences you've had. So if you had a good virtual experience previously, so the actual question is, what's your view on events going digital? Have you had good virtual events? No, sorry. If you had a good virtual experience previously, would you be happy to execute this virtually? What that's meant to say is, if you had a good event experience previously, would you be happy to execute this virtually? Okay, so it's about that shift from live events to virtual events. How comfortable would you be going from something you were confident in live wise to a virtual one? What would have to happen to make you confident in doing that? That makes sense? Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on that one, David?
So I think that, I mean, as we're 12 weeks into this, so it's early days, and I'm sure that the technology will develop and the formats will develop. But I still think they're different things, and they fundamentally are achieving different marketing ends. So I'm not convinced yet. If that was the question, I think I understood it. Of sticking with, if live events pop back up next year, I don't think, I think, really we need to go back into them because they do something different and something that's very hard to achieve virtually. Virtual events do a different thing, and they're extremely good at some things that you can't achieve with a live event, but actually, the same is true the other way around. And looking at my plans, there are big gaps that are live event shaped.
Okay. Paul, what's your take?
I would agree with David that live events do something that virtual events do not do. But the appetite that we're seeing for virtual events, and if I know I can work with a partner that brings the right audience in a live event, in a live real world event, the expectation is they can bring that same audience into a virtual event. And I have a little bit more capacity to create original content coming out of the virtual event because of all the screen recordings that we're doing through all these platforms like the Zoom recordings. And this is going to be available as a recording, and I can take that recording and cut it up. Whereas if I go to a real world event, maybe I got to bring the video crew, or they have the video crew and I got to pay extra for that, whereas it's built into here. So I think we're still going to see a blend of them. I think we might see more live events have virtual components to them and just that hybrid event model.
Okay, Sophie, closing comments from you on that question?
I think with virtual events, actually, live event brands and some media brands have an advantage here because they already have an engaged community. Mm-hmm. And the virtual events that I've attended that have been the most successful drew on the power of a pre-existing community. So people were interacting, they were spotting familiar faces, and you got that much more natural sense of networking. And people were actively drawing people into the conversation and inviting their friends and their network. So I think the two feed off each other. If you've got a community that you can engage in live events, I think you can be a trusted partner for virtual events as well.
Okay, so we're right at the end now. We've obviously gone over because we had a very long and horrible start where we couldn't get the technology to work. And I think we could go on with this conversation for such a long time. And I think that's partly because we haven't really had this conversation before. We haven't had the opportunity to hear from marketers, from buyers, to hear that research. And it's been so I mean, the fact that so many people have stayed on for an hour longer than they're expecting to is quite testament to how engaging what you guys are talking about and how vital what you guys are talking about is. And there's some amazing takeaways, and we're going to be going away at Flume and kind of trying to, like you said, Paul, kind of cut up this content and try and filter it back in so we can turn it into some lessons. But some of the core ones that I've got, and in a moment, guys, I'm just going to ask you for kind of one do and don't for the sales teams out there, like in your opinion. But some of the stuff, just to sum this up, is that the decision-making process hasn't necessarily done anything massively different in terms of changing, but it is becoming more crucial to limit risk and make sure that people don't worry about putting their head above the parapet. So making sure that we're working with that client and helping elevate them and achieve what they need to achieve is absolutely crucial, as is personalization, not just going in with a broad overall overarching, here I am, and talking about your product. They care about them much more than they care about you. And deep listening now is more important than ever before. Paul talks about 2 ears, 1 mouth. You've all probably heard it before, but wow, is it important right now, because they need to know that they can trust you to be able to trust whatever you're selling to them. And also in terms of selling on, helping them with toolkits, helping them with easy to navigate decision-making process toolkits such as presentations, but also helping them understand where the pushback's going to come, who's going to be motivated to drive this through, and having that conversation is absolutely crucial. You essentially need to partner with your client to help them manage through that decision-making process. Sophie, one thing that came out from you, and it's kind of been an overarching thing that leads into next summit, which is in 2 weeks' time, is this idea of we need to ultimately, as sales teams and as event and media companies, create propositions that aren't just there to leave the client to and hope it works. Actually working with the client to help them make that product and that solution work with the right messaging and with the right implementation is absolutely crucial. So trying to help them drive ROI so they can feel confident in working with you is crucial, because they are never, ever going to take that risk if you don't. And in the next session that we're running, we're actually going to be having a number of audience experts on the panel who are going to be talking about what works and what doesn't work in terms of messaging and in terms of engaging with them right now. So ultimately, what that's going to do is allow everyone who's watching this to start filling the void that a lot of clients have, which is, well, we're hearing about the platform you're selling, but not right, how's it actually going to work and how do we make it work? So that's going to be the next session that we do. Sophie, if you had one do and one don't for people out there based on what we talked about here, what would your list be?
I think it would be, don't take the risk of leaving it in the hands of the client. You've got to support them at the moment to be successful, particularly as live events, as virtual events are new to everybody. So you've got to de-risk that process. You've got to de-risk their skill or lack of it by being prepared to really understand their objectives and support them in achieving it. And don't tell me how to do my job.
Yeah, for the first 5 minutes, putting you down.
Yeah.
David, how about you?
Probably don't phone me. I think I've made my views on that pretty clear. And then what would I say? Do? I mean, it's fundamental, but listen. You know, even if you've been selling into a particular marketplace for a long time, it's pretty likely that right now the needs of the people you're talking to are somewhat different to how they've been previously. Unless you ask open questions and genuinely listen, you're not going to get a handle on that. And it's unlikely you're going to have a fruitful conversation further forward.
Okay, great. Thank you, David. Paul?
Through this all and talking about how to connect with people, I think that is one of the most incredibly important things is that intro. So first off, you got to find the mutual connection to get through to that person. So what do you do if you don't have that connection? And I think that's where you need to turn to a trusted partner, whether a media partner, an events partner, some partner to help make that intro. And so typically what do we tend to do at events? We sponsor a panel and we do a case study presentation, let's say, and we bring up our client and we talk through a case study in front of everybody. But instead of doing that, what if we sponsor a virtual event, have this here, and get 3 of our targets to be in there instead? In all the cases, we know how many customers we have. We're not selling in B2B to millions and millions of people all at once. We're maybe selling to, I know in influencer marketing, we're selling to 40,000 buyers within the US market. I know who they are. That's a very tangible number. Let me pick 5 of my targets. Let me go to a great events partner and say, let's do a panel discussion on that. Help me connect to these people, because if they open the door and make the connection for me, that's going to be a hell of a lot better. So instead of me going up there talking about myself and my case study, why not go with my targets in there? That's the virtual intro. I have to pay for it. I get it. But if you don't have that hand holding to be brought in, that's a great way to do it.
Fab. So, ladies and gents, hopefully you have enjoyed that and taken a lot from it. There's a lot of tangible takeaways you can take from that, but there's so many, it's slightly overwhelming. So what we're going to do is try and take this away and put it into some form of do's and don'ts rules, I suppose, from what we've got here, and trying to turn this content to really useful stuff after today as well. I want to say a massive thank you to Paul, to David, and to Sophie for joining us. And we hope you'll join us again in the future. It's been so enlightening. A couple more quick things. One is at Flume Sales Training, we have created 4 programs of sales training to help selling in a crisis, leading remote teams in a crisis, connecting sales and marketing teams to create collateral in a crisis, and also selling virtual events in a crisis. And so if you want to get in contact with us about that, then we do have a lot of training that we're doing on that, which is delivered virtually and having amazing events impact. So please let us know if you want to get involved. Also, we've got another summit in 2 weeks' time. So the next summit, as I said earlier, is around driving ROI for clients. And we're going to be looking at the audience perspective to understand what they need from clients to get better results for clients. So please join us. There's a link on the right-hand side that Rich has just put in there. We'd love to see you there. And also, we're going to be running a roundtable very soon over the next week or so. And if you want to get involved in that roundtable is to go deeper into what we've talked about here and continue the discussion with the industry, because we are committed to trying to build the sales excellence for after the outbreak, which you guys are going to need to fit into to help these guys buy more, do more, and get better results. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you to MASH Media. Thank you to AEO, and thank you to PPA for supporting us. Thank you so much again, Paul, David, and Sophie. It's been wonderful. You're amazing, and we'll speak soon. Thank you very much.
See ya.